Hello and welcome back to Sonya Maya Psychology. I'm Dr. Sonya Maya, a psychologist, sex therapist, and Clitician. I post every week about psychology, relationships, and sex, a lot of nuance in there. Today, I want to talk about the phenomenon of heterosexual straight women being attracted to their same sex. And I don't know why it went like this, because even though it might sound kind of confusing, it is possible for straight women who really do identify as straight being attracted to women, and it's a lot more common than you might think. So if you like content that's about sex, relationships, psychology, hormones, hit that like, hit that subscribe, turn on bell notifications, and yeah, stay tuned. There is this aspect of straight women being curious about other women and feeling this attraction towards women while still not wanting to have any type of sexual relations with them, any type of intimacy with them in real life, IRL. I'm also going to get into the phenomenon of straight women who tend to get a little bit more experimental when they are drinking alcohol, which for me can be a little bit of a difficult topic. Not difficult in the sense that it's like, oh, so difficult, but it can be quite nuanced and confusing. So I'm going to get into some of my clinical perspectives on the matter, but also some of my personal experiences that have led to some confusion, given that I am bisexual, not straight. But I have met a lot of women who identify as straight, but have definitely expressed curiosity. Yeah, we're going to talk about how all of these themes fit into sexual identity. Let's talk about porn. Yes, let's talk about porn. So, across major adult platforms, lesbian pornography ranks as one of the most popular categories among women, and this includes straight women as well. This is not new. If you watch my content, this probably isn't super surprising for you because I do talk about it quite a lot. And I did find an interesting study and resource on this topic if you want to check it out. It talks about how there's reasons for this, right? So a lot of straight women feel more comfortable watching lesbian porn because when you compare it to heterosexual porn, a lot of the time it feels more genuine. It feels less aggressive. In terms of heterosexual porn that's often made for the male gaze, it tends to objectify women. It has a lot of unrealistic expectations about a woman's body, or also how a woman's body responds to sex. They tend to skip over any type of communication about sex, consent, etc. It just creates this false perception of what sex actually is, which I think we know this if we're experienced when it comes to sex education. But lesbian porn, yes, it does have some of that, but just not as much. Something I found interesting about this study is that a lot of straight women were actually stating that they watch lesbian porn to show to their male partners to be like, here is actually what I want you to do. Can you please use this instruction manual? And this is super valid if you think about it, especially if you happen to have a partner who unfortunately thinks that, oh, you could just skip the foreplay, or they watched a lot of that, heteronormative porn growing up, and then they think that this is how you touch somebody.
Alphabet with your tongue. A, B, C, D. And when she grab your hair like she gonna pull your damn head off, stick with that letter. I'm talking about B, or D, 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 D. Vaginas deserve respect.
Whereas when you're watching lesbian porn, there's a lot more emphasis typically on foreplay and heating up the oven. And when I say heating up the oven, I mean literally like taking your time, right? Because I've talked about this many times, but in order to arouse your woman, your vulva owner, right? Oftentimes it takes between 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes, in order for a woman to feel aroused enough for penetration, if that's what you're doing. So you really want to take your time with the foreplay, and lesbian porn does a lot better at that. So instead of watching heterosexual porn, which might emphasize a lot more of the male's pleasure and like the sex ends, quote unquote, when the man ejaculates, the cum shot, whatever, that is just not centered around female pleasure, whereas lesbian porn tends to be a lot more focused on mutual pleasure, foreplay, taking it slow, responsiveness, and it just often feels a little bit less goal-oriented or transactional, at least from my experience, okay? But just because a woman is attracted to women on women, this does not mean that they actually want to participate. It is completely valid to fantasize about something or use some type of porn or sexual content to get into that state of arousal without actually wanting to act on it, right? Fantasy really helps you get to that place of safety. And safety is so important for letting go and experiencing pleasure. So yeah, I think that I've made my point pretty clear about why it makes sense that heterosexual identifying women are attracted to lesbian porn. And we'll get into this in a little bit too, but there is a possibility, of course, that maybe some of these individuals are attracted to women in the way that they would identify as queer, bisexual, etc. But given backgrounds, might not be able to feel like they can access it due to shame. But I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a little bit. So now let's talk about the topic of straight women wanting to play with other women under the influence of alcohol. And like I said before, this is a little bit more of a complicated, nuanced topic for me because of my own experiences being a bisexual individual. So what I mean by that is I'm not shaming it. I think a lot of us have been there, right? Where it's like, oh, you're under the influence. So it's like, oh, I want to make out with everyone. And in my early 20s, in my times where I would like party a little bit more, I did have quite a lot of straight friends who would want to kiss me, make out with me, that kind of thing when we were drinking. And, it was like fun and games, da-da-da. But it was confusing. I'm not going to lie. It was confusing because given that I'm bisexual and they're not, it's like, what is that? What is actually happening here? Is this for novel experiences? And I think every situation is different. I think oftentimes these women were attracted to me, but in terms of psychologically what happens when you drink alcohol, your frontal lobe gets deactivated temporarily, where your decision making, impulsivity, inhibitions, all of those things definitely get skewed. So it's possible that a lot of these women are and were very attracted to me. And, because they identify as straight for whatever reason, could be different situations for each individual, they don't feel as much of that shame when they're drinking. So it's like, oh, let me just express myself and like do what I want, right? Most of the time it wouldn't go further. It would just be kissing. Other times it did in a lot of ways too, often initiated by them, but won't get into that in too much detail. And, not shaming it. We all have our moments where we want to, let loose and experiment, that kind of thing. But I would say in terms of where I'm at in my life right now, from a consent forward and ethical standpoint, I would not feel as comfortable with someone who identifies as straight wanting to make out with me when drunk, because I rather us have that conversation when our frontal lobes are in the room, if that makes sense. Basically, all of that to say, even if I was interested and attracted to these women, there was just something that felt off. And when I really reflect on it, it's really that. It's the fact that I care more about the connection and the friendship that we have than doing something that's impulsive in the moment that you might regret later. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what I did or what they did or anything. This is all fun, right? But in terms of where I'm at in my life right now, in my 30s, wouldn't necessarily want to participate in that without there being some type of consent conversation beforehand. But, if they definitely identify as bisexual, like, no problem at all, right? But I just wouldn't want to be a part of their experiment, I guess, if that's a way to put it. But let me know if you've ever been in a situation like that, because no regrets. It's just, a mindset shift, one could say. I don't want anyone to feel different about it after, feel differently sober, have some type of shame or confusion. That's pretty much what that's about. But like I've said before, when alcohol is involved, consent gets complicated. So it's important to keep that in mind, regardless of how you identify gender-wise. That's really important. People, when they're intoxicated, aren't able to fully consent. And it is a very nuanced and complicated and sometimes triggering topic, but it's important to acknowledge. But yeah, before I close this chapter and this particular topic, I will say that I do believe that ever since my frontal lobe is fully developed, I've become wiser, you could say, in these areas, and boundaries have changed, of course. One thing about me too is that I tend to not feel as comfortable in certain environments where it doesn't feel reciprocal attraction wise. Like, for example, I wouldn't mind going to a strip club for fun, right? But I wouldn't actually necessarily enjoy getting a lap dance from someone unless I knew that that person was attracted to me. Or I'm not sure if I would ever be comfortable receiving services from a sex worker, because for me, the mutual attraction piece is very, very important in order to actually be in the moment. So not that there's anything wrong with that. I actually am super supportive of sex work. I just don't think I would ever be a client, one could say, because I feel like that person really has to be attracted to me. So that might be another reason why I feel less comfortable now with the idea of like straight women wanting to make out, if that makes sense. So what about women who are attracted to women, but they identify as straight? However, it's more because of how they've been socialized. I have met a lot of women who have either realized that they were queer, bisexual, lesbian later on in life, or maybe realized early on and then hid it from themselves and from society because they were unfortunately raised in an environment that was not accepting, whether it was for religious reasons, cultural, etc. So therefore, they didn't feel like they could fully explore. This is definitely possible, and it's something to keep in mind. I'm more so focusing on the aspect of women who are straight, but they still are attracted to women, which I know I've said before sounds confusing, but that does exist too. They're so nuanced. Sexuality is very nuanced, and I know that people don't like that because it's hard to wrap your head around. It's like, oh no, she must be gay, but that's not true. But yes, of course, there's also individuals individuals who maybe actually would identify as gay if the water they were swimming in was not going to make them feel bad about it and still make them feel accepted, because we have needs in society to feel accepted, respected, heard, seen. And if you were raised by homophobic people, then maybe you did have to suppress that part of yourself. And if you relate to that, that's awful and I'm so sorry. But it's really difficult to navigate that shame. But I do strongly encourage individuals to explore that part of themselves when they have the means to and the freedom to, and find family outside of family if needed, because that just sounds like a difficult way to live. And I know a lot of people have to deal with that, which is really sad. But like I've said many times, your attraction exists on a spectrum. In a lot of ways, there are a lot of women who identify as straight, but maybe they have a little bit of a queerness to them as well. But this doesn't necessarily mean an automatic identity shift. It's really what you make it. Don't let anyone tell you what you are, type of thing, regardless of how people talk on the internet. That's just nonsense. That's typically just projection of their own insecurities anyway. You can also even be straight, have sexual experiences with another woman and still be straight, and decide that you don't want to do it again, or just decide that you do and still identify as straight. It doesn't matter if other people get bothered by that. Do what you want to do. The most important thing here is that you are honest with yourself and transparent with other people. And I'm talking about people that you're connecting with in your inner circle, right? Whether it's partners, romantic partners, right? And friends too, family when safe, right? I'm not talking about like the world, right? It's really your business, Something else I want to talk about too is threesomes and partner pressure. And if you want more details on how to have a threesome in a way that is safe, secure, communication-wise, I did just make a video a couple weeks ago. Check that out. That one goes into a lot more detail on this. But again, a lot of the time, threesomes, that partner pressure comes up in relationships. And like I've talked about before, it's very, very common for men to want to have a threesome. It's the most common fantasy. So you might find yourself in that situation where it's like you're a heterosexual woman, you have a male partner who's heterosexual, and he wants to bring a woman in. But like I said in this video a couple weeks ago, it's really important to keep in mind, you also have to be okay with it and curious about it, rather than doing it because you have a fear of rejection or you're people pleasing or avoiding conflict. So really be mindful about how it might impact the relationship and how you might feel after. But if you want to learn more about that, check out that video from a couple weeks ago. So now let's talk about some research that ties this together. I did find a recent 2025 study by Keenan Bar, Anand, and Joel in the Journal of Sex Research, and it examined gender specificity in sexual attraction and fantasies. So this was actually a pretty cool study because they collected large data sets of nearly 57,000 participants. So that's a major strength for the study. And what they found was that men tend to show higher gender specificity in attraction. Specificity? That's a lot. That's a crazy word. Straight men are strongly attracted to women and not men. And it found, similar to what I was talking about already in this video, that women, especially straight women, tend to show lower gender specificity. And in layman's terms, get it? Layman. Stupid pun. Women were more likely than men to show sexual responsiveness to their non-preferred gender, meaning women, right? So straight women showed measurable attraction or arousal toward women even when identifying as heterosexual. And the authors are pretty clear about what this means. This does not mean that these women are bisexual, that their identity should change, and they do not claim that attraction equals behavior, meaning that they're going to act on it. So I think that's important to keep in mind. The research does support that women tend to have a more flexible and context responsive attraction than men. So pretty similar to what I was saying. This study looks at attraction, fantasy, self-report, indirect measures of arousal, but it doesn't measure actual romantic attraction, like wanting to get into a relationship with a woman, long-term identity, relationship desire, emotional bonding. So that doesn't mean that straight women want to date women. It does not mean that heterosexuality is invalid. It's definitely valid, just like any other orientation. And that doesn't mean that attraction leads to action, like I keep saying. That is an interesting study that definitely confirms what I was talking about in this video. One takeaway I want to leave with you is this. We're all allowed to have curiosity, complexity, fantasy about whoever we want without wanting to act on it, okay? This is not a one size fits all. There's a lot of nuance in this. No shame if you fantasize about the same sex. No shame if you've played with the same sex and you don't identify as being attracted to, it really doesn't matter. I hope that this can remove some of that shame or some of that confusion, even though nuance does lead to confusion, you know what I'm saying? And it definitely goes against some people's beliefs about humans, which is okay. It's important to look at the research and to have an open mind. What really matters is being kind to yourself, being honest with yourself, and respecting your boundaries and other people's boundaries. So I hope you learned something new. I hope it resonated. And yeah, if you like this kind of content, again, if you could finger that like and subscribe button and turn on those bell notifications. I post every Sunday. Share with somebody that might learn something new from this video. And everyone, please make pleasurable decisions and decisions because you deserve it. I'll see you next week.